What would you do if this happened to you? Purchase first home, just notified about upcoming $60 million community center being built across the street. My wife and I just purchased our first home in a popular suburb in northeast Indiana, Fishers, Indiana to be precise. We closed on the home in May of this year. An older home built in the 1950s, but it had been meticulously maintained and was sitting on over 1 acre of land. Additionally, our home is located on top of a small hill, which overlooks a beautiful 110-acre farm. Like, seriously, the view is gorgeous. Well, approximately 1 month after closing, the wife and I were passively watching the local news one night and were shocked when the camera suddenly panned to a shot of our home. Our local town was proposing a new $60 million 25-acre community center that would be built on the 110-acre farm that I mentioned above. The entrance to this community center would essentially be perpendicular to our driveway. I immediately began making phone calls to the city, talking to neighbors and so on, trying to learn more about this project and the impact it'll have on our home and neighborhood. Information is extremely hard to come by, so I'm curious if anyone has gone through something similar. As I mentioned previously, our home was built in the 1950s. The home, along with our 4 neighbors, make up a tiny subdivision. We do not have an HOA. There are no easements on our property besides a small 7.5-foot utility easement on the back side of our property. There is no right-of-way easement and no sidewalks on our road. The road we're on is relatively busy, as there's an elementary school 400 meters north of our home. Additionally, and like I mentioned before, our home is built on top of a small but steep hill. I don't believe it would be possible to build a sidewalk on our road without some type of retaining wall. If the city attempted to widen the existing 2-lane road into our property, I genuinely don't think my small car could make it up the driveway without scraping the front bumper. Extending the road to the opposite side, the east, would also cause problems as there is a massive drainage directly to the east of the current road. I'm not in civil engineering, but that sounds like an extremely expensive undertaking if they wanted to move that drainage to make space for a wider road. So my questions are, has anyone gone through something similar before? What should I expect? So far, I've received zero communication from the city about their plans, their construction timelines, and so on. And since there are no easements on my property, how much power do I have here? If they ask to take X amount of land from me, is it smart to simply say no? And how's property value impacted by a massive building like this? Obviously, the increase in traffic will be brutal, but I'm curious if there are actually some benefits of being this close to a new state-of-the-art complex. So how likely is it that the city would issue some type of eminent domain on our property? Our neighbors seem to think that the city may attempt to purchase our entire subdivision, but all 5 homes in our division were sold and bought in the past 12 months. The city had ample time to buy up all these homes and obviously chose not to. There's a ton of more information and details and concerns that I'll hold off at sharing at this point, so if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer. Obviously, I knew that eventually the farmland might be sold, but it sucks that it happened literally a month after buying our first home. An update. Realize this post came across as me being a grumpy new homeowner. Yes, there's probably some truth to that. I mentioned this in a comment, but I'm actually okay with the physical build side of the center. What makes me nervous is having the entrance to a 370-car community center perpendicular with my already small driveway. And I've seen the generic press release that the city put out. I've seen the build plans. I've seen the survey and the renderings. I have yet to see any documents explaining how the city will manage traffic flow, noise and light pollution, and so on. I expressed my concerns to the city and was told, "We understand that increased traffic is a concern for local residents. We're continuing to consider possible options in terms of road improvements." I guess my assumption would be that all these details would be finalized before getting city council approval, but I guess that's not how these things work. Do you agree with this comment, saying that you won't have any notice on this unless you sign up for it and that you should not volunteer to give your property away? I wouldn't, would you? He scoffed at me, so I got him fired and sent back to his country. Posted by Throwaway 2021-1250. So let me preface this by saying I do feel somewhat bad about the events that transpired, but it would be eating my conscience to say that I didn't do it on purpose, because I did. I started my first full-time job when I was 20, fresh off college and ready to take on the world. I resided in a Middle Eastern country where people got brought in frequently by employers, and one mistake could cost them everything. I was outside this because I was a resident of the place despite not being from there. Anyways, when I first started, I got along very well with my coworker despite the fact that he came off as a lot of bad things for me. We tried hanging out, but the more I got to know him, the more disgusted I became. He was a sexist, a purist of his religion where he believes that execution of certain people should be allowed, and he was extremely homophobic. But nonetheless, I tried making friends with him because I was open to anything. In our office, we have a portable Wi-Fi that he took with him every day. It's free internet, and I never commented on this because I have my own. I can afford it, and so can he. More on this later. The closer I got to him, the more he opened up, but in the worst ways. He would send me lewd images while we're in the office of women, talk about drug use, and sometimes disappear from work for hours on end while I manned the office. Like I said, I was 20, I was still young and naive, and I tried my best to seem calm and friendly. I wanted to make an impression. This man, however, was the opposite. He was several years older than me, and he acted like he was above me through every step. But I ignored it, because I wanted to be civil. Sometimes I would help him with his work, until eventually his work became mine. He would just expect me to do it without even lending a hand. I didn't say anything, I just did it. His missing from the office became more frequent, and sometimes he would only be at work for a measly 2 hours out of 9 hours, popping in and out, and the office manager is too chicken crap to say anything to the general manager. Then there's the lateness, where I would come in on time every day and he'd come an hour late. Still, I kept my mouth shut. It escalated to him adjusting attendance records, so it seems like he's not absent, even though his absences were frequent. Unfortunately, he was put in charge of that too. I remained quiet throughout all of this, remained civil, until finally, I spoke to the general manager about pursuing a different line of work. I was always into graphic design, and they needed to get some work done, so I offered to do it. But during this time, I couldn't afford much things anymore because I had to help pay for bills for my parents, so I usually just walked to work back and forth every day and limited my eating to once a day, meaning the Wi-Fi was no longer something I could afford. So, as an agreement, I could take the office Wi-Fi with me and work on designs from home. However, my coworker didn't agree to this and pretty much attacked me with a barrage of insults. He scoffed at the fact that I needed the Wi-Fi to do design work and said I was a joke. I've suppressed the majority of what the conversation held, but it went something like this. I said, "I just need it tonight, you can have the Wi-Fi tomorrow." He said, "Why? It's not yours." "I need to do some design work." "Yeah, me too. I need to do that too. So, leave it here." I couldn't remember much of what else he said, but there was a scoff after he said that. And he made fun that my design sucked and that I should just stop while I'm ahead. My blood boiled and I reached a point of no return. I immediately phoned the office manager and talked about the situation and how if I don't get the Wi-Fi, I'll complain to the general manager, who did, in fact, give me his blessing, unlike this turd. He immediately called my coworker and told him to give me the Wi-Fi, which he did, and that was that. Except, I'm a petty person, and I'm not about to let some a-hole get off with a slap on the wrist. The next day, I went to the head office and had a meeting with the general manager. I spoke to him about all the misconduct this guy had, how he's always late, never in the office, changes his absences, steals money sometimes, and so on. I spilled my heart out on all his wrongdoings, showing the messages and the photos that I was sent during shift that I never asked for, and how I'm doing all of his work. It escalated to a point where he got brought into the main office for a meeting where I proceeded to berate him in front of the manager, and he could only try to defend himself, but I was prepared. Haha, it turns out the office manager never even spoke to the general manager about his misconduct. Afterwards, he was brought back to the office having been yelled at by both my and the general manager. And I could say that's where it ends, except it's not. After he left, the general manager realized that if I'd been doing all the work, then why didn't I say anything? I responded that I was simply there to work and to help. However, with what just happened and the fact that this guy was getting paid more than me, I've decided that if he's here, then I won't be staying in the company. I gave him a choice, me or this guy. The answer was obvious, because by the next day, he was handed a termination letter and another letter that states he's been booked a ticket and he has to head back to his home country within a month, and he's barred from entering the country for several years due to his public misconduct that was reported by a certain someone to the local authorities. I could say that's the end, but okay, this is the last one, I swear. See, he had a girlfriend back home, a fiance more like, whom he has been cheating on. Funny enough, he added me on Facebook when we first met, and she proceeded to add me too, because he talks about me to her. Well, our messages weren't just inappropriate, it showed the details of him cheating on her, with me questioning him if that's a good idea. Every screenshot, sent. All the photos of the women he's been with, sent. She was livid, and I kept apologizing for keeping her in the dark, but that I thought she deserved to know at least. I haven't spoken to her since, but judging from the fact that her Facebook status no longer states she's engaged to him is enough of a confirmation. I sent him one last thing before blocking him on every social media we've been connected in. You deserve this, you jerk. It's been several months since then, and I'm thriving at work. I got a raise, I have better coworkers, and I'm getting a promotion. As for him, well, he's out there somewhere in the world, who knows, and who cares, right? We're no longer in the same country, so whatever else happens to him no longer phases me. Though he did once send me a photo of his fake Italian ID because he was planning on illegally migrating there next year. I'm on the fence if I should send it to the authorities in Italy or not. Just as a precaution, I might consider migrating there at some point. And here's an update from OP. I should probably elaborate that this happened over a span of 3 years, not just when I was 20. I'm 23 now. The revenge happened a few months ago only. I worked with him during that time, and I was in the wrong for enabling him a lot, but I did give him a lot of chances, which he messed up for all of them. Insulting the job I wanted to do was just a catalyst, because I've been working hard to shift from my position into that. As for the ID, I could escalate things further, but with everything I've been given since he left, I don't want to tempt fate any more than I have. Things are good now, and my new coworkers are great. I have no complaints now. This was the first time I actually set out to destroy someone, and I don't intend to do it again, unless I have to, of course. As for the office manager, he got sacked like 2 months ago. He was deemed incapable, so they brought in a new manager to handle the place. Leave with the team? Sure thing. Posted by Winterborn253. The setup. I work for a popular grocery chain that operates in the southeastern United States, where shopping at is supposedly a great time. I've been with the company for 18 years, 4 of them as a department manager before I stepped down due to being a salaried worker that worked ridiculous amounts of overtime without compensation. Now, that was recently dealt with via a class action lawsuit. I still work in the same department in which I was once a manager, so I know just about everything there is to know. If anything goes wrong, I can make it right. If anything breaks, I can fix it. My current manager is an awesome boss that I'd do anything to help out. He understands that his employees are people and not just his minions to do his bidding. He's willing to work with on any schedule needs, so we're all willing to do the same. That being said, about 2 years ago, we were shorthanded on employees that were able to close the department, particularly those that could close the kitchen. We talked and I agreed to close every night for a while until we could get more people on board and trained in the different areas of the department. This went on longer than expected and he apologized, but I told him not to worry, as I was actually enjoying having a regular schedule even though the hours weren't ideal. Fast forward a few months and we're finally staffed properly, and my manager thanks me for my help and we agree that I'll continue working nights because I like the consistency and he knows that I'll always make sure that everything is set up well for the next morning and I make his job easier for doing so. During this time, we've picked a lot of great workers and a couple awful ones. The great workers were amazing to work with, and I call them my A-team, and we'd often get off work 30 to 45 minutes early because we helped each other out and got crap done. The awful workers took note of willingness to help out and would neglect parts of their closing duties because they knew the A-team would get it done in order to get off ASAP. This goes on for a while and gets worse, reaching a point where the other A-teamers and I talk to our boss and say that we don't mind helping people out, but we're done doing other people's jobs for them. He agrees and changes the policy so that once we're done with our sections, we can clock out and leave after being checked out by the manager in charge, or MIC. The event. Things have been going pretty well, and as long as 2 or more of my A-team workers are closing with me, we're still able to get out early as a team. We always make sure to set up any other closers for success and do any general work like taking out the trash, adjusting inventories, and so on before leaving, but we're still able to leave a little early. This is important because we never have to worry about getting overtime, or OT. We have a strict no OT policy. Even 1 minute of overtime will earn a write-up for the employee and my manager unless approved ahead of time. Then it happens. 3 out of the other 4 A-teamers quit within 2 weeks of each other. One found a better job, one had a family crisis to handle, and another moved. I went from working with coworkers that had years of experience in the department to coworkers that have been with the company for less than 6 months for the most part. There are a few coworkers that are approaching their 1-year mark, but I still have more experience than all of my fellow closers combined, probably tenfold. Suddenly, instead of getting out early, I'm having to work past my scheduled times on a bad night and barely getting out on time on good nights. I try to manage my own time in order to not have to leave early or to come in late. But I've been cutting it close. 3 weeks ago, a particular manager in charge, there's 7 MICs that each have a set night to close, is closing. I'm closing with newbies and I'm in danger of going into overtime. This is a Thursday night, and while I do close Friday, which is the final day of our week cycle, I make sure to keep some wiggle room just in case anything goes wrong on Friday night that keeps me from leaving on time. I finish closing my section, take the trash, adjust the inventory, and generally help out as much as I can until it's my scheduled time off, at which point I clock out and page my MIC to check me out. I'd have paged sooner, but I knew that my section was clear. Again, I've been doing this for a long time, and wasn't going to be asked to work off the clock. The following conversation occurs. MIC says, "Why are you paging me over here? The others are clearly not finished and you should be helping them." I say, "Well, I paged you to clear my section so that I can leave and not worry about overtime. I did XYZ to help them out, and all they have left shouldn't take more than 10 minutes or so." "Do you work tomorrow?" "Yes, but I'm closing kitchen and always come in early on those days to ensure a smooth transition and to make sure I don't fall behind. The little bit of wiggle room that I have left to avoid overtime is going to be used for that." "You can't be in danger of overtime if you still have another day to work. You know that the entire department is supposed to leave as a team. You leaving before your coworkers isn't right. I'll let you leave this time, but from now on, you leave with your team." Side note, this MIC came in from his sister store after the fiasco mentioned in the setup. The next day, I talked to my direct manager and asked him how he wants me to handle the situation. He assures me that I did the right thing and was just managing my own time in order to avoid overtime. He knows that I always try to set everyone up for success. The entire reason I'm still closing 5 nights a week is for this very purpose after all. I should also mention that on this particular night with said MIC, I left the department a fair number of times to do extra work, like get trucks from the back, clean up the back room of cardboard and trash, take out old grease to the canister outside, and so on. And she came looking for me while I was doing the side jobs on 2 occasions. On the second occasion, she told me that she wanted me to alert her anytime I'm going to leave the department, so she'd know my whereabouts. I thought that it was odd, since no one else had to do this, but whatever. I later learned that she told my manager that I was taking entirely too many smoke breaks. I take 2 a day as per company policy, and said that I wasn't doing what I said I was doing for the side work and just using them for extra breaks. I sighed internally and had an idea. It was time for some malicious compliance. The compliance. Every night that this MIC is closed, I've had a great time complying to her wishes. First, every time I leave the department, she knows. Going to the restroom? Paged. Lunch break? Paged. Taking cardboard to the baler, running trash, have to help a customer outside of my department, paged, and paged. She's got to know where I am, right? Secondly, I still refuse to put myself in danger of overtime while also refusing to work off the clock. So what happens? I punch out at my scheduled time no matter what, and then I'm on my own time. I sit down at my manager's desk, pull up other malicious compliance stories from this sub on YouTube, and start enjoying his malicious compliance post at full volume while my coworkers continue to finish up around me. Last week, she sees me on my phone. "What exactly are you doing? There's still more work to be done. Don't you see your coworkers are still working? Why are you just sitting there?" "I've already done my work. I've helped out as much as I could, but still had to clock out on time. I'm just here waiting for them to finish so we can leave as a team. That's what you wanted, right?" The fallout. Nothing spectacular yet. She gives me this stink eye every now and again when she sees me, and I simply smirk back at her. She tried complaining to my manager, but he always has my back. I even shared with him that I've considered further malicious compliance if she keeps pushing me by keeping her updated on my whereabouts, even when she's not the MIC. I'm keeping that one up my sleeve for the time being. She never stated that my updates were needed only when she was MIC, so I'm just waiting for her to try something else. Loan Shark, posted by AC1308. This is a story of someone I used to know. I posted it first in stories about Kevin, so we'll call him Kevin. He needed a place to stay, and my mate needed someone to help pay the rent, so he moved in. Apart from a few minor dietary habits, such as walking around the house drinking chocolate milk from a 2-liter bottle and not putting it back in the fridge as the sour smell slowly grows, it seemed to be fine. In the meantime, he wasn't getting what he considered an adequate wage from taxi driving, which is fair, so he got a job at a bakery. But then he decided to go the whole hog and started gambling online. He had a system, you see. But the system still needed refining. A lot. He was shoveling money into it and still not getting a return. But to ask him, he was just a few days away from getting the big jackpot. But he didn't have the money to make it work. So he borrowed from a loan shark. We didn't know about this part. So he lost that money too. Didn't tell anyone. Had no way of paying it back. Went to my mate and said, "Oh, I might be moving out in the next few weeks." My mate said, sure, it wasn't a big deal, and he figured he'd be able to just tighten his belt a little. The next morning, after my mate went to work, Kevin went around to the power and phone companies and had everything cut off, and got the bond for each of them back. Then he grabbed his pre-packed bags and vanished down south. I'm guessing he'd been getting "where's my money" from the loan shark. My mate gets home and everything's turned off. Everything in the fridge is either spoiled or well on its way there. He has to run around, get everything reconnected, restock a fridge, and cover rent that month. Not a happy camper. So then, a few days later, he gets a knock on the door. "Are you Kevin?" These are big guys wearing white shirts with ties. Very polite, but they're ripped as heck and he can see the tats through the white material. He's fully aware of who and what they are, and he's able to start making a guess as to why they're there. He invites them in, proves that he's not Kevin, and then shows them documentation on what Kevin pulled on them. They're sympathetic, and on the way out, one of them gives him a card. "If you ever find out where he's gone, give us a call." He puts the card on the fridge. A few months later, Kevin calls from where he's vanished to, asking for his share of the rental bond. Never mind that he never put any money into it in the first place. So my mate says, "Sure, where can I mail it to?" Kevin rattles off an address. "No worries, it'll be on your doorstep before you know it." My mate hangs up, takes the card off the fridge, and makes a call. "So, you wanted to know where Kevin was?" That Christmas, he got a card from the loan shark with $500 in it. Sued the HOA. They towed my truck twice off my property with updates. Click the video on your screen so you find the final fallout of this one, and I'll see you there.